Hey everybody, I'm Zoe, minus Chandi, and welcome to Bound by the Cloak, Minisode 8, Deeper into the Nightmare. We wanted to bring you even more sleep paralysis stories, so you're really not going to hear too much from me, except for me occasionally reading a story that was submitted by a Bound by the Cloak listener, as well as my own personal sleep paralysis story. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Hi, my name's Emily. I'm 24 years old and I think my first sleep paralysis experience started when I was a freshman in high school. And then there would be periods of time where it would happen like every night in a row. And then it also at my first time, it started out as like the typical oh my gosh, I saw a shadow in my room and it was really scary. But then it slowly, I guess as I got older, it turned into people I knew. So it was kind of like a hallucination.
This was one of the most disturbing things my mind could have imagined. I was also in my room, and the paralysis started. There's a shadow casting outside the door, like it was getting closer to the door, and the door was open. And when it gets there, I see an old man. He's tall and big, trying to squeeze through the door. He was so big, he couldn't fit, and he was literally pushing himself through the door, causing his face and body to take on different weird shapes, and getting scratches and bruises. I could hear and feel his heavy respiration. It all ended as soon as he was able to get through the door. And I was again able to move, alone in my room. The guy looked kind of like the old witches from Spirited Away, but realistic and taller.
My name's Kira. I work in the education system and I'm 22 years old and I've had sleep paralysis for a good 10 years of my life, but it's not super consistent. So it's not a really big thing I have to deal with. Mine always comes from nightmares. So I only ever get sleep paralysis after a nightmare, and for me it's it's only when I'm waking up from that nightmare. And I'm one of the lucky few bunch of people who have sleep paralysis that also have hallucinations when in an episode. And so it's almost always the same nightmare, and that's how I know the sleep paralysis is going to happen. And so it's always it's that dark figure. For me, they're coming to choke me and kill me, and so that is my nightmare for some reason. And then I'll wake up and then I'm paralyzed and I can't move, and then it's that hallucination of that dark figure from my dream just will continue to come. But I also get clusters of it, so I will. Once I'm fully awake, I will try and stay up, because if I go right back to sleep, I'm going to have the same nightmare. The paralysis is going to continue and it's going to be this huge cycle. But usually that happens anyway. So I'll have to try and keep myself up for an hour to just stay awake. And that can sometimes help with making the episodes not happen again, going back into it. But usually I get a good chunk clusters of sleep paralysis, maybe once a year. And it's maybe for a couple weeks at a time. And it's all throughout the night, but then I'm fine in the next couple weeks.
Hello, my name is John. I am an American Colombian living in the United States all my life. I'll begin with really how it really happened with sleep paralysis. It was when I was actually younger. The first time I was 14, the second I was around 17 and 18. And it seems to happen every time after a long physical feat. In this instance, it was a long week of pretty much Boy Scouts, and like an extreme version where it was like we're hiking, we're doing jamboree, we're doing 12 mile hikes. We're like, it was just exhausting. And when I finally came home from all this, took a nap, and when I woke up, only my eyes opened. I could feel my body and everything, but I could not move anything. I couldn't. And the first thing was just panic, shock. I was trying to move my toes. I could remember laying down on the right side of the bed. I was facing the wall, or at least my face was facing towards the wall. I could feel my eyes just going all around and everything. And I'm just like, at one point, I'm like yelling, like, what the heck is going on? Panic, full panic mode. I think like about maybe 15 seconds later, 20 seconds later, I start to almost come back to life. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm like, arms out, going crazy. And I'm like, what the heck was that? And I was afraid to look it up. I was afraid to actually tell anybody, thinking that I had a problem or something. But it was, put it simply, that was just my experience. That was the first one.
Usually, my experiences with sleep paralysis have been pleasant and sexual, which I know isn't really the norm. I've also had episodes of thinking I was awake, then realizing I was asleep, and trying to wake up over and over. But one night, I had a truly terrifying experience. I was lying in bed, half asleep. My back was to the edge of my bed, and I was facing my husband. Suddenly, I felt him slide into bed behind me and snuggle up to my back. He started running his hand up and down my side and pushing his hard-on up against my ass. Then, I felt what felt like someone pushed their face against my boobs. I'm lying on my side with someone pressed tightly against my back, and now someone is against my front. I feel them bury their face between my boobs. I could feel their hot breath against my skin. Realizing there are two people molesting me, my eyes snap open. I see my husband on the other side of the bed, but I can still feel two people touching me. The one behind me has a firm grip on my ass and is squeezing my ass cheek while pushing themselves tighter against my ass. I'm still staring at my husband, trying to make noise to wake him up, but I can't make a sound. The person in front of me starts biting me, sharp nips at my breasts, chest, and neck. All of a sudden, I feel a weight settle on the end of the bed, and it feels like someone is crawling towards me. Then, they are crawling on top of me. I actually manage to turn my head and see this black silhouette leaning over me. I can feel their body on top of me. They are heavy, and they lean their face down into my face and growl my name. I screamed and jumped up in the bed. I never have panic attacks, but I had one right then. My husband freaked out because I never panic over anything, and I was hyperventilating and crying. After I calmed down enough to tell him what happened, I had another panic attack while I was explaining what happened. It took me forever to fall back asleep. It was terrifying. Of note, I rarely have sleep paralysis at night. 9 times out of 10, it only happens when I'm napping, especially if I'm napping on my couch. Also to note, I never had sleep paralysis until after I turned 30. Even then, it was rare. Now that I'm over 40, it happens fairly often. Note that I take naps often, but whenever I do take a nap, the odds of it happening are pretty high. Usually, I look forward to the episodes as they often turn into lucid dreams. However, since my horrifying episode, I haven't been looking forward to it anymore and have been actively avoiding taking naps due to the fear that it will trigger another bad episode.
I had it, I'm pretty sure it was stress related. It started probably about a year after the COVID lockdowns started. I probably had it maybe, I don't know, 20 or 30 times, I would guess, somewhere in that ballpark. My background is like the way I experience sleep and that kind of thing is through studies of Tibetan Buddhism. The kind of experience was very similar to a book I read. I think it's called the Tibetan Book of the Dead or something like that. It's like when you die, you're in this void. There's like no movement, no sound. So when it happened, I thought that I was kind of hallucinating, maybe, that, my experience with that subject was maybe taking over my brain and it was some kind of dream or something. But then, like, talking to people, they were like, no, that was probably sleep paralysis is what was happening. So, yeah, it was just like as close to being dead as I could imagine it would feel like, or maybe being comatose or something like that.
So I think I just experienced my first sleep paralysis episode, like about 20 minutes ago. So everything is still fresh in my mind. I was drifting off to sleep, having what must be the start of a random dream, when suddenly I felt like I had woken up. I was aware of my surroundings and where I was and was randomly scared. I was lying on my side and felt like there was something behind me watching me. My mouth felt really dry, and I was either unable or too scared to move, as if my body was saying, "Don't turn around no matter what you do." I felt as if something lightly touched or pressed on my hip for a moment before lifting, followed by random sounds like someone's hand scratching and moving around on the bed sheets behind me. This was then followed by me hearing random songs, which I don't know the lyrics to, yet were playing perfectly at randomly increasing and decreasing volume from what felt like different locations. At that moment, I genuinely thought I was being haunted by some sort of evil thing. For some reason, I clearly recall whatever it was being female, or at least trying to pretend to be female, but it was standing right behind me. I'm not a believer in ghosts or demons, but for a few minutes there, I was questioning everything I thought I knew.
I think the scariest was when it was like a week. I just got it every night. The first one was I was sleeping and I woke up, or I thought I woke up. And like from across the room, I saw my dad like half the face in the doorway, and it like went like that. And I was like, "Daddy?" And I like leaned closer and he like ran at me and I could feel it like that. And then I shot up.
I think my worst one was probably like maybe a month or like 2 months ago, I think is when it was. I went to bed. I usually try to follow a really like strict like sleep hygiene, like going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. Because I also just like have like bouts of insomnia, and it's not like falling asleep. It's like staying asleep throughout the night. And so I really struggle with that, which is where I think my sleep paralysis comes from, is just like not the best sleep habits. And then so I'm like sleeping, I'll have this nightmare, and so the nightmare is like it's this dark shadowy figure. I guess like closest thing could be like a demon or like a boogeyman, and like a big like black shadowy kind of like tall, and they're like coming closer to me, and it's usually like in my room. So the dream is like happening in my room, and so it feels like real life almost, which is a little bit worse. But they'll like just keep coming closer to me and closer. And in the dream, I also start off like I'll like then become paralyzed just like I would in my sleep paralysis. So then I can't move. And then I'll wake up, and then I'm like, okay, I know I'm awake, and then I can't move. And so I'm like, okay, I know I'm in an episode right now. But it doesn't help, because then I like will hallucinate, and that like shadowy figure comes back into like when I'm paralyzed and I'm not like sleeping anymore. And then it's hard because like I know I'm like what's happening, and I know it isn't real, and I know it's like I'm gonna like be able to move again soon, but it's like the anxiety of it. It's just like, oh my gosh, something's gonna happen to me. Like I feel like I'm gonna get hurt. Like this person, like this shadowy monster is gonna like come and kill me, even though I know that it's gonna end in a few minutes.
The first time I didn't tell somebody. When it happened the second time is when I actually tried to analyze it, since I figured out that I could potentially get out of what's happening. So this was another instance where it was from soccer tournament weekend, playing like crazy, lay down again, and it always happens after you sleep. I didn't go to sleep on the bed. I was on the couch in this instance. And again, wake up and I'm like, okay, I'm frozen again. Let's see like what's happening. I'm not gonna go crazy this time. And this was actually maybe 3 years after. So it wasn't a consistent thing. And I'm here sitting down and I'm like, okay, I can't move anything. I'm frozen. I could feel stuff kind of, but just really can't do anything. Can I move this arm? Can I move my left arm? Where can I start wiggling around? And for me, it seems to be my hands first. And I just come back to life. The first instance, I was like fighting this. So I was like really explosive the first time. And it felt like, I'm going back to the first time now, but like it felt like it was like 100 pounds or like this weight over me. And then I'm like slowly moving up. In this instance, I was just trying to figure out, okay, I'm just coming back to life. I'm awake. When more maturity, I looked it up online. I'm like, what is this? What's going on? And I was like, oh, okay, this is what it is. And then I told my mom and she's like, oh yeah, I've had that many times. I'm like, oh, damn.
I was taking a nap on the living room couch when the paralysis started. I felt an immense fear and immediately noticed a goblin-like creature in the corner between a desk and a window. It was all pitch black, but the creature was somehow still clearly visible. In a matter of seconds, this thing rushed towards me at a great speed, only to disappear when it got right next to me. Then I could see it again in the corner where I first saw it, and this repeated a couple of times, while I couldn't move.
Okay, so the first time I felt like a head where my feet were, and then I felt an arm crawl up and then go into my mouth. Like that was my first sleep paralysis. I woke up, like I was like shaking. I whipped out my phone and I'm pretty sure I texted my friend, like, I had such a scary nightmare, like I can't go back to sleep. And it was like my mind was scared and awake. Like maybe my body was awake, but my mind was still like, you're sleeping. Like automatically my eyes wanted to go back to sleep. But I was also like, no, because that was the scariest thing ever. And I remember looking it up. I felt like I was awake, but I couldn't move and there was a monster. And then it showed me an article about sleep paralysis. And then I told my family, I was like, this is so crazy. And they were like, wow, that's scary. Anyway, I was like, okay, that's it.
So, at the time when we were recording with Renita, I had only 2 sleep paralysis episodes up until then. I've had another sleep paralysis episode since then, and I thought I would share it. So, I was out of state visiting a friend, and we had been up pretty late for the first couple of nights that I was there. So this, I think, like 3rd night, we thought we'd go to bed pretty early because we were going to have a pretty early start to the next day. And I normally don't sleep on my back, but for some reason during this trip, like half the time, I was sleeping on my back. I woke up in the middle of the night, or so I thought, to what sounded like a woman yelling in the hallway right outside of the bedroom. I also noticed that there was this red glow coming from the bedroom door, and the door was slightly ajar. So the red glow was coming from the hallway, and it kind of lit up like the doorway, and you can still kind of see the darkness a bit though. And the room was completely pitch black. It was like a pulsing red light too, coming from the hallway. And there was this really kind of angry voice. It started out just kind of like it was like a female voice. It kind of started out, I don't want to say low, but it seemed like it got louder as this sleep paralysis episode went on. But I thought I was awake doing this. I didn't know who it was. I was like, okay, there's a female voice in the hallway. Maybe it's my friend. Maybe it's somebody else. But it wasn't like I couldn't like clearly make out what the voice was saying. But it didn't sound happy. It sounded kind of angry. So then all of a sudden I was able to like shift my eyes down towards the end of the bed. And that's when I noticed this dark black thing. It was like darker than the rest of the room, even though the room was really, really dark. And it had these kind of yellowish glowing eyes. And it started to crawl up the bed towards me. And then like on top of me. So that's when I tried to move and tried to scream. And I realized, okay, I can't move. And I'm not screaming, but like when you're in sleep paralysis, you think that you're kind of like, you know you're not like fully screaming, but in your head you can hear yourself like help. But like you think maybe somebody can hear you and you're trying really hard to move, but nobody could hear anything. So because I've had sleep paralysis in the past, I recognized that that's what was happening. So I tried to wiggle like my feet or my toes or something like that. And after a while it worked. I would say the whole sleep paralysis episode lasted for no longer than like 2 minutes, if even that. This was the first sleep paralysis episode where I actually like fully hallucinated.
That's when I kind of started looking into the lore of it, which was pretty interesting about how is like a demon taking over you and the more Catholic beliefs on it from the past. It was really interesting. Both instances, it was just extreme fatigue. Like my body was like, it's not even like I want to go to sleep. It's like I laid down for a second dead, like exhausted. Actually, my roommate had one not too long ago. And what he's been doing, he's been training rigorously for his academy. I guess that's the similarity that I share with him, with how it happened with him. Exhausted, and then he had the paralysis. The first instance was scary, but I quickly expunged it. I was just like, okay, it happened. I didn't really take it to a deeper level. The second time I was observing, and it never was a thing where I was like, oh, this is wild. And then once I looked it up, and since it wasn't such a constant occurrence, I was just like, oh, okay, it happens when it happens. And I'll just let it ride. It didn't impact me in any way. And since I haven't had it, but those two it's just like anything, like that first one. It was just that shock. And then once that second time happened, I knew, what was going to happen. Nothing dramatic. Maybe just because I'm just too chill.
This one was at night, and it was the only time when I hallucinated I moved around. I was in bed when I felt the typical paralysis things, like not being able to move, panicking, stuff like that. And then I saw a shadow figure crawling inside my room through my window. Then this thing started running at a crazy speed. And I was also able to run through the walls and ceiling. At this point, I started feeling an incredible urge to catch it and started, quote unquote, running behind it. I say running because at this point, it was like my brain was split in two. One half was chasing this thing, running behind it over the walls, ceilings, going out of the living room window and into the bedroom window, while the other half was still panicking in bed, unable to move.
I was raised religious.
One time I
so
woke
it's
up
kind of
and I
funny
saw
the
my
first time it
sister
ever
like walking in
happened.
front of me, and then
I
I
woke
would
up
just
sleep
snap
and
out
then I
of
woke
it.
up and I was
And
like
for a
trying to scream for
while,
my
I
mom's name
couldn't
and I was
tell
oh my
if I
gosh,
like really
it must be
saw
the
it or
devil. I
not.
was
It
like,
would
this is
either
him. He's coming
be
into my
the
room. I must have done
shadow, I
something
would
really,
feel
really
its
bad. So as a kid,
presence,
I
but
was
it
like,
wouldn't be there,
what
or
did I
it
do?
would
I
take
was like,
the
oh my
form
gosh,
of
it's
someone
definitely
I
the devil.
knew,
And then I
which
woke
that
up and
is
I
like
like
the
told my mom
scariest.
about it and she was just like, it's okay. Like, you were probably just scared. I didn't think I realized what sleep paralysis was at that time. I thought I was just like so scared that I couldn't move. And then it didn't happen again for a while. I was probably like 10, so I wasn't that young. And then it probably happened again not that often, like not every year at that age, but happened a couple more times. It was kind of like the same thing, like a scary figure was coming. I'm like trying to scream out to have like someone help me, like whether it was like my mom or like my siblings. I was like, help, like trying to just scream out and I couldn't move and I couldn't talk. And so it was like even more terrifying. And then I think as I got like hit my teens, I kind of was just like Googling, like like Dr. Google. I was like, what is this? Like, why am I having this? And then I figured out it was sleep paralysis.
Yeah, it was always like I was in some kind of dream state, I think. Like, I don't really remember that part of it. But then there would be like this moment where everything kind of stopped and I was aware of my own mind, like consciously, as opposed to like, when you wake up and you don't really remember anything. And there would be this span of time. I don't know. It never felt like more than maybe a minute or so. But a minute where you're like trapped in your body, can't open your eyes, like that's a long time. So it freaked me out. So, I mean, that's basically what happened.
The scariest one that was recent was I was home alone at night, and when I woke up, I guess that fear of someone coming into my house like went into my brain because I saw one of my plushies like in the air, and and it was just floating there, and it took me a second to realize that there was like a hand holding it, and it like like wiggled it, like slowly kept going closer, and I was like, there's someone in my house, like I don't know what to do, and I froze, and it felt like forever, and then I snapped out of it, and I did not go to bed. I stayed up because I was so scared. So I remember I went to my mom. I was like, Mommy, I had a really like strange nightmare. She's like, oh, that's sleep paralysis, but no one else, I'm pretty sure no one else has experienced this.
Yeah, I told my husband about it, and he's a psychoanalyst. So he's kind of the one that was like, yeah, that's sleep paralysis. And I didn't tell him for a long time because it just felt like something that came up and then it would pass, eventually. But this went on for months. So eventually I was like, I need to talk to somebody about this.
And it was like, it wasn't too bad. I've learned like some habits, like I'll really focus on moving my fingertips, which will help me get out of an episode and help me not focus on like if I'm hallucinating, if there is like if I'm hallucinating and like that shadow figure's there, then I like try to just like focus really hard on like moving my fingertips to like not become more anxious because I think that like worsens my episode. And then I also like have like a very very mild form of like insomnia where I just wake up throughout the night already, and so I'm like not always getting consistent sleep, which is really hard. And that kind of moment, so usually it's when I'm having like struggling with sleeping is when I will have these episodes, and then they're usually clusters, so it's like I'll have one that night and then it'll happen like maybe 3 or 4 more times that night, and then it'll just keep going, and then I'll wake up and I'm like so scared to go back to sleep because I'm like, I know this is gonna happen, this is an awful feeling, I don't want to do it again, and so like I'm fighting myself to stay awake. And then I think that just brings on more anxiety, and like I like higher emotions I feel like will bring on that like sleep paralysis episode for me. So it's like this like, okay, I don't want to go to sleep, but if I make myself too anxious, then I'm also gonna have this happen again.
So what keeps me up is anxieties, just the thinking about the normal things about thinking of the next day. And there was a period in my life where I did have trouble sleeping during college, insomnia and all that stuff. And it all came from just worry. And then after therapy, there was just techniques. Now, it wasn't medication based, but there was just techniques that I followed through to knock out. And I've had it since, really just separating certain elements, perspectives. And it helped a lot with just saying, okay, I don't care about what's happening right now. I could easily fall asleep now.
I think with COVID, it was very stressful for me because like I said, my spouse, has like immuno issues. My father has immuno issues. So like the idea of just going to work at that time was I could get sick and then like kill people I love because I'm sick. So it was just like really, really stressful. Kind of at the same time as the sleep paralysis was going on, pretty much like every afternoon at work, I would kind of have these like, they weren't like full on panic attacks, but I would feel like nauseated and like I couldn't really sit still and like that kind of stuff. So both of those things kind of happened at the same time, which kind of further reinforced to me that something was going on. I need to talk to somebody. So eventually I talked to my husband and he suggested trying BetterHelp just because it was kind of an acute trauma situation where just like talking through it, he thought would help a lot. And it did actually. That was in September of 2022, about the second week that I started BetterHelp. And then the third week of 2022 was when I actually got COVID for the first time. So in a way, when I got COVID, it was actually kind of a big relief because I got through it and, nothing terribly bad happened. It was an awful experience, of course. After that, it was basically fine. So then it was like, I can do this and not kill anybody that I'm close to. So a lot of stress was relieved from that, but also through therapy. At that time, there was no test or anything, no treatments, nothing. For me, it was incredibly stressful. I mean, I'd looked into it a little bit just out of my own curiosity with like the mind and that kind of stuff throughout my history. So I kind of like once I had a name for it, I knew what it was and like that it would probably pass on its own. And even if it didn't, it wasn't like too threatening. So not to worry about it too much. But yeah, it's been probably a year since I've had an episode and I'd never had one before COVID. So I kind of think I don't want to say I'm over it or whatever, but I don't think it's something to really worry about, if that makes sense. Mine was definitely the blackness, nothingness variety.
Once I realized what it was, I like couldn't move at all. Now, when it happens, I'm like, this is not real. I'll try and take deep breaths. But one thing is like now I'm able to move. One time I was sleeping and I have a pile of like plushies and a hand came out and grabbed it and I was like, okay, this is not real. But that was like the first time I actually like moved, and I still don't know if like I actually moved or I was still like dreaming. But yeah, I always have to be like, okay, it's not real, you're not real, take a deep breath, and then I'll like snap out of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Like I said, it's part of my religious study to prepare for that state. So like it was kind of like a dry run for death. It was fascinating, but eventually I was like, this is enough of this. So yeah.
I think mine comes in lumps or like when I'm really stressed out, but I don't know why. But my parents' couch, whenever I take a nap, I don't know if it's the cushion, but I always get mild sleep paralysis and it's just like auditory hallucinations where I think I'm up. I don't know, I can never describe it, but when I go to sleep, I can tell when I'm going to get it. It's just the way that I go to sleep. You're falling slowly and it feel like it's gonna be hazy. And then no, it's not gonna happen. I go to sleep with that feeling. I get sleep paralysis. So like my body can tell. I dream every night. Like I'm a really vivid dreamer. I'm able to lucid dream. So I'm like, I'm awake and then I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys, guess what happened? Like sleep paralysis. Then we all talk about it. But other than that, I feel like, okay, it's a nightmare, it's a sleep paralysis. Wake up, go about my day.
For me right now, it's like once a year, and then it's multiple times throughout the night. But then it's like for like maybe a couple weeks, but not every night. So, you're awake, you're fully awake. So, like, the scientific reasoning behind it is you're coming out of your REM cycle or you're going into it. So, sleep paralysis only happens like right before you fall asleep or right after. So, it's in that REM cycle. So, your body actually like relaxes your muscles because when you're dreaming, your body doesn't want you to act out the dreams. And so, it like will like quote unquote paralyze you. So, you're not like if you're grabbing a cup of water in your dreams, you're not going to like move your hand up and do that. So that's why sleep paralysis happens. And so it's like your body making sure you're just like not doing something crazy. Imagine if like someone just shot you with like, if you have like you know how an epidural like makes your legs not be able to move like below the waist, just like imagine that all over. Like you could open your eyes and like move your eyes, and maybe you can like slightly like twitch your hand, but you just wake up knowing, like I wake up and I'm like, I can't move at all, or like, and I can't speak either. I had to stop doing this because I think this is why I started having more episodes, is I would listen to true crime at night. Then when I had an episode while the podcast was still going, I was like, I can't ever do that again. That was too scary. I think a lot of it has to do with like your mental health. I think it affects a lot of people. Like if you're really anxious, like an anxious person, I think like it's more like I'm an anxious person. But like, so I think that's part of the reason. And like for me, I think it's my anxiousness and I think my sleep hygiene, even though I try to like stay on this routine, like I just don't have really good sleep hygiene. Well, I do, but like I'm not good at sleeping basically. And so I think those really affect it. And I think like I try to not drink caffeine to like help me sleep. So I think a lot of it for me has to deal with like how much sleep I'm getting.
Well, that's going to do it for this Minisode 8, Deeper into the Nightmare. We want to thank everybody who shared their stories with us, all the listeners, whether you recorded it yourself or you sent it in for me to read. We thank you so very, very much. We at Bound by the Cloak would like to wish everybody a happy holidays and a happy new year. Here's to having an amazing 2025. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, as usual. And we're on social media. We are on TikTok for as long as it's available. Hopefully, it continues to be available. We're on X, Threads, Instagram. So, take care of yourselves and have a happy, healthy holiday and new year. Thanks for listening.